One of the best spots to view our fine city is from Mousehold Heath, and the eye is immediately drawn to the distinctive spire of Norwich Cathedral, the second tallest in England. In the 920 years since the laying of the foundation stone and the start of the Benedictine priory on the site, there's been a long list of significant developments. For example, the completion of the nave to the west door was mid-12th century, though it was only 30 or so years later the first of 3 fires occurred. In fact, in 1463, lightning struck the spire and the nave roof was destroyed.
There's been riots, revolts and Kett's rebellion, the dissolution of the priory in 1538, Puritans pillaging during the Civil War, and throughout most of the building, the 3 R's: restoration, rebuilding and renovation. And in the last 12 years, the development of the hostelry and the refectory, officially opened by Her Majesty in 2010.
The cathedral sits within the Close, a 44-acre site defined by a substantial flint rubble wall and 4 fortified entry points. St Ethelbert's Gate dates from early 14th century and replaces an earlier structure seriously damaged in the 1272 riots. It is named after the pre-conquest church that stood nearby and was subsequently destroyed when a disagreement between the monks in the priory and the good citizens of Norwich spilled into fierce fighting, which led to the cathedral and the cloisters being set on fire, the priory plundered, and King Henry III ordering the citizens to pay for and build a replacement. The Erpingham Gate has less violent origins. Sir Thomas Erpingham was an important Norwich figure of the late 14th and early 15th centuries. He made substantial donations to the city's religious institutions and distinguished himself when in charge of the King's bowmen at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. The name Erpingham Gate was not used until the mid-18th century, and the statue of Erpingham kneeling was not placed until the late 1600s. But nevertheless, the gatehouse is decorated with the coat of Sir Thomas and the first and second wives, so it's probable that he did pay for it. There is also the Bishop's Gate, which leads to the Bishop's Palace, and the Watergate, more commonly known as Pool's Ferry. The gate dates from the 15th century with the ferry house dated 1647 next to it. It was previously called Sandling's Ferry, as he was the first man to hold the ferry licence. It became the Pool's Ferry Inn at the end of the 18th century and was operated by John Poole as both landlord and ferryman until his death in 1841. A century later, and the ferry ceased when the last ferryman, Cecil Mollett, finished in 1943. Unlike the city defences, all of the gates and most of the walls survive in excellent condition. The defensive nature of the structure was important because it was not only needed to define the secular city from the ecclesiastical precinct, it was required to perform a military function, as in the 1272 riots.
At 44 acres, this is the largest cathedral close in the country. There are 6 scheduled ancient monuments within it, 65 listed buildings, of which 5 are Grade 1. And central to it all is the building that's been at the beating heart of our city's religious life for over 900 years. For me, it's not until you actually step into the main nave that you fully appreciate how simply vast this building is. You take in the architecture and the pillars and the roof bosses, the organ and of course the decorative west window. But you can't help but be stunned and mystified at how on earth did they build all this long before the days of modern building techniques, before the days of scaffolding, long before health and safety. How on earth did they do it?
For the first 450 years of its existence, Norwich Cathedral was also a Benedictine monastery, and whilst there are no longer monks here, the ethos of this tradition is a continuing influence on cathedral life. It can be identified across three key values: worship, learning, and hospitality. In the 6th century, Benedict of Nursia wrote his Rule for Monks, based on his own experience of fallible people striving to live out the gospel. This rule proved to be so good and well balanced that it became widely adopted as the model for Western monasticism. In the present day, Benedict's rule continues to be valued both in the church and beyond. It expresses a vision and values for life as a community.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Steve, for your time this afternoon. Tell me about the daily worship here at the cathedral.
Well, worship is at the heart of everything we do. You'll probably have gathered that the cathedral's a very, very busy place, but at the root and heart of it all is our daily rhythm of worship. And we begin every single day at 7:30 in the choir stalls, so where the monks would have sung their round of daily services for the service of morning prayer. And that takes just under half an hour, and that's very much based on scripture, the scripture readings for the day and the psalms set for the day. That's followed by a communion service every day at 8 o'clock. We use different chapels in the cathedral for that, so that all of our chapels are prayed in throughout the week and have a Eucharist offered in them. Then later in the morning, another Eucharist celebrated usually by one of the priests from the wider diocese. And then every single day, 5:30, evensong. That's a sung service with our cathedral choir. And in the holidays, we have visiting choirs come in to do that. Our whole day is wrapped around that rhythm of worship.
Of course, the cathedral used to be originally a Benedictine monastery and a priory, so the rule, Benedict's rule, is still very much the strength here in the community.
Yes, it is. I mean, we at evensong each day we read a little section of Benedict's rule. So we're reminded, and we introduce that by saying that it's part of our tradition to do this, to remind us of our monastic background, but also as a guide to our life in community today, but also the other great Benedictine principles of learning being at the heart of everything. Of course, we've got all the facilities for learning here at the cathedral with our wonderful library, but also our education centre for children. And we have well over 12,000 school children coming through the cathedral each year. Education and learning, very, very important aspect.
Central to the worship in this cathedral is music, with the organ situated at the very heart of the building. And the rich choral tradition at the cathedral is supported by a men's choir along with a boys' and girls' choir, who sing at services as well as at occasional concerts.
The monks would have sung the chants of the daily offices throughout each day of the year, and very much that formed the pattern of their worship. And then since the time of the Reformation, there has been a group of boy choristers here at Norwich Cathedral, as with many other similar cathedral foundations around the country. The choral worship has been absolutely at the heart of the worship of this building. Moving on, of course, a number of centuries to the present day, we have a set of boy choristers and a group of girl choristers who are supported by some adult singers who we call lay clerks. Between them, they are responsible for the singing of choral evensong every day. So alongside this wonderful tradition of boy choristers, we're very pleased here that the girl choristers are now so much an integral part of the musical fabric of the place. We do have a programme of concerts throughout the year. In a sense, it's important to stress that the real core of what the choirs do here is to sing that daily office of choral evensong. But on top of that, there are many other musical highlights. And of course, music is a wonderfully powerful tool to draw people into the cathedral, whether they are believers or non-believers or whatever faith they may be, or of none. Actually, to come in and enjoy music in this magnificent space is a very powerful draw for people. It's almost like the music is, a very living and beating heart to, all these ancient stones. It really brings the whole place alive.
This building is not called a cathedral because it has a pointed spire or because it's longer and taller than any other monastic building. The word cathedra, which in Latin means chair or in Greek it means seat, is a bishop's throne. It is the seat of a bishop. And here in Norwich, it sits behind the high altar, placed there by the founder Herbert Lussinger, whose tomb lies just a few feet away. Within the cathedral are a number of smaller chapels open for private prayer. St Luke's Chapel forms part of the first phase of the cathedral building and houses a 7-sacrament font from the now lost St Mary in the Marsh Church. In addition, there are delightful stained glass, including the Virgin and Child, dating from the 1460s. But without doubt, the most amazing piece of art treasure is the extremely rare 14th century altarpiece. As more than 90% of English medieval paintings were destroyed at the time of the Reformation, this is a rare survivor from that period. It was rediscovered in 1847 when someone bent under a table and looked up to see that on the underside were these painted panels. When the table was reversed, this astonishing altarpiece came to light. It is composed of 5 panels which represent the death and resurrection of Christ. They show Jesus being beaten, carrying his cross, the crucifixion itself, and the subsequent resurrection and ascension. The colours are extremely vivid, especially the use of red and the unusual use of a greenish blue. In later times, this red became known as Norwich red, as the city dyers made the colour internationally famous in the production of the much sought-after Norwich shawls of the 18th century. St Saviour's Chapel in the far eastern part of the cathedral is the regimental chapel of the Royal Norfolk Regiment and commemorates its fallen from its formation to more recent wars. It contains an outstanding triptyche painted around the beginning of the 15th century by Norwich screen painters. And in the Jesus Chapel, we're able to see the outstanding wall paintings of the wise men visiting the infant Jesus, dating from around 1510, and a rare Norman altar slab.
The nave is undoubtedly striking. Its immense length and height, with the 14 arcaded Romanesque bays displaying a remarkable harmony with the late 15th century Gothic roof. It simply takes your breath away.
And functioning as key stones to hold the roof together are the roof bosses, of which there are over 1,100, the greatest number of any cathedral in the world.
One of the crowning glories of Norwich Cathedral are the roof bosses that you see above you here. There are about 1,100 in here. They are historiated, so they're telling a story. So rather than just being decorated with foliage or something like that, they're actually telling a story. They're telling the story of the Bible. So from the east end of the nave, you can just see it at the end where we can see the edge of the tower above the organ. It starts with God creating the world, and then throughout the whole of the nave going towards the west, it goes through the Old Testament, the New Testament, finishing off with the Last Judgment.
So the bosses tell a story, and they were put up in the mid-15th century when perhaps people didn't read and write. So were they designed to tell the story of the Bible? Is that one of the purposes of them?
It's very likely that that's the purpose, because they are so much a story. What we tend to see in churches today is a lot of bare walls.
In the medieval period, there would have been colour and decoration all over. So you get some places where they've used the walls to paint them. And here, those stories that might have been painted onto walls or appeared in windows are actually in the bosses.
In the way some churches have Rudolph screens, we saw one at Binham Priory,
Yeah.
which tells stories that the people then have been told by the monks, by the priors, by the priests, right?
Absolutely.
Because obviously the ones here in Norwich Cathedral, if you're trying to tell a story, they're so far up, you can't even make them out that well. It's not that easy.
It's not easy at all, which is always one of the questions that people ask when they say, well, if it's supposed to be telling a story for people to read, why are they so high up? Could you actually read them? And nobody's ever really answered that question. One of the suggestions is simply that it's about the fact that the story is told in the building, so the presence of the story. And actually, if you do take the time, the easiest way is to lie on your back on the floor. But you can, if your eyesight's not too bad, you can actually pick out some of the bosses because they're quite big.
Churches in the Middle Ages acquired wealth of silver vessels for celebrating Mass. Each church needed at least one chalice for serving the wine and a paten or a plate for holding the bread. And up a small staircase you can view some of the treasures held here. One of the great treasures for many cathedrals is the organ, and here we have one of the largest pipe organs in the country. David Dunnett has been the organist here for 20 years.
There's been an organ here for many, many centuries, and the first reference to an organist was Adam the organist back in the 14th century. So there was some sort of organ here many, many years ago, and over the centuries organs have been destroyed by fire and have been taken down by the Puritans, and the organ that we have now is a rebuild of another organ that was destroyed by the fire. It was originally built in 1899 and partially destroyed in 1938 in a fire during a service. So a very dramatic end to that organ. And then it was grandly rebuilt in the 40s and has been added to a little bit since then, but it's essentially a bit of the 1899 organ, but mostly 1940s. Music that's written for the Anglican liturgy is very much reliant on the organ to support congregational singing and choral singing. Over the centuries, of course, it has been done by bands and by instrumentalists, but the organ has always been fairly central to cathedrals, and the music has been built very much to match the choir and the organ, both in combination and in solo. So it's absolutely essential and crucial to what we do here on a daily basis.
The cloisters were the passageway that linked the different parts of the monastery. The monks would use the cloister to go to the church for worship and prayer, to the chapter house for meetings, to the refectory for meals, to the library to study, and the hostelry to greet visitors. It is the largest surviving monastic cloisters in England, damaged in the 1272 riots, so most of it dates from late 13th to mid-14th century. Along the North Walk there are Elizabethan wall paintings depicting the coats of arms of dignitaries associated with the visit by Queen Elizabeth I in 1578. And at the entrance into the cathedral, the highly impressive Prior's Door, which dates to around 1300. It is a finely carved and decorated arch with thin piers at its side and recesses displaying statues of Christ, John the Baptist, David, and Moses bearing a scroll of 10 Commandments. And like the nave of the church, so the cloister has bosses depicting various biblical characters, and the Green Man. And they are a great deal closer, so you can actually make out the references in the designs. There's been so much that I've not been able to show you. The library, for instance, the painted vault, some of the chapels, the herb garden, more of the historic buildings in the close, the school, the Broderers Guild. There is a great deal to gather on a visit.
My holy trail started here and ends here, some 900 years after the foundation of the Benedictine monastery. Now, of course, the monks long gone, but with their values of worship, learning and hospitality still very much evident in the daily life of this community. Some of the buildings didn't survive time, or Reformation, or nature. Others have had new life breathed into them. It's been a hugely interesting and informative journey on this trail, a chance to have a peek back in time at how life might have been in centuries past, to indulge and to learn. A trail that reflects the many twists and turns of life.